Shalom and welcome to the weekend edition of the Daily Dose of Hebrew. We're looking today at Jeremiah chapter 9, verse 25. I remind you in your English Bible, this would be verse 26. It's the last verse of chapter 9. And these last two verses, the previous verse, 24 in Hebrew, and this verse here, seem to be sort of a final summary of what the Lord's declaration against his people. What he wanted was to have their hearts really open and tender to him. What he found was something quite different, and he's calling them back to think about this. And then this final verse is going to sort of wrap it up, and we'll move into something new in chapter 10. A long verse, but fairly easy. Let's go ahead and read it in Hebrew. It's continuing verse 24, the previous verse, where it's talked about the people who were circumcised and yet uncircumcised at the same time, and God was going to punish them or visit them. So we're picking up the verb pakad, which we saw from the previous verse, which means to come and to visit, and with the preposition al. So we're picking up here in Hebrew, al Mitzrayim ve'al Yehuda ve'al Edom ve'al Bnei Ammon ve'al Moab ve'al kol kitzutzei fe'ah hayoshvim bamidbar ki kol hagoyim arelim v'kol beit Yisrael arelei lev. Wow, what a statement at the end. So, as I said, we're picking up this verb to visit upon, meaning to punish. So the Lord is going. This is a description of the days are coming when he's going to do this. He's going to call all the nations into account. And he's going to punish, here he's going to punish Mitzrayim, Egypt, and Judah, because Judah, even though they are circumcised in their flesh, obviously they are uncircumcised in their hearts. That's what we've been talking about here. Now, there's some discussion about the other nations we're going to see here. Did they practice circumcision? Some places in Egypt did at certain times. Some of the other nations perhaps at certain times did as well. But that's not the main point. The main point is, well, we'll see as we get toward the end. So Egypt and Judah, and upon Edom, this is the proper name for Edom, and upon the sons of Ammon, and the sons of Moab, so these are the descendants that are over on the east side of the Jordan, and upon all, now this is an interesting word, ketzutze. Katzatz is a verb which means to cut off or to trim, to clip. And it's the clippers, or those who are clipped. This is like a passive participle, passive cal participle. It's a masculine plural with this serayot here, but you can see the passive idea with the shurik between the second and third consonants. So it's the clipped of the side. Peah is a word which means the corner or the side, clipped on the corners. Most people think this is referring to the pagan custom of clipping their hair on the sides of the temples, which was prohibited to God's people, which is why, we see Jews even to this day, more Orthodox Jews with the long hair locks that come down, the curls that hang on this from the sides of the forehead. Pagan nations would tend to clip those, and maybe this is referring to that. Those who clip the sides of the head, and upon the, and we have an article here. And then Yoshevim, this is a masculine plural participle. It's a cow from Yashav, to dwell. So this would be the dwellers in the desert. Again, with an article right in here. In the desert. For, or because, all the nations, and it may be referring to all the nations of the world, or maybe referring to the nations, meaning these nations I've just mentioned, the other nations outside of Israel, or outside of Judah. But all the nations arelim. Here's our word which means arel. This is from the same root, meaning to be uncircumcised, having foreskin, literally. So all the nations, and in this position here, it's being like a predicate nominative, all the nations are uncircumcised. And, or perhaps even a but all the house of Israel, and this may be englobing both Judah and the northern kingdom of Israel, which is now in exile, obviously, but all the house of Israel that remains are uncircumcised. Ooh, same adjective that's being used over here, but in a construct state here with heart. They are uncircumcised of heart. Again, I refer you back to Jeremiah chapter 4, verse 4, where he called the people to circumcise their hearts. But also that's something we know that they can't do. We almost have to go to Deuteronomy. We have this great promise in Deuteronomy chapter 30, verse 6, that one day, the Lord himself will circumcise the hearts of the people, something that they couldn't do themselves. Wow, incredible. Not too much difference in the translation. Let's hide our work here, and we will look at a couple of translations just real briefly. New American Standard. Egypt and Judah and Edom, nations which are going to be punished, and the sons of Ammon and Moab and all those inhabiting the desert who clipped the hair on their temples. The clippers, those clipped on the side, that clipped the hair on their temples, that pagan custom. For all the nations are uncircumcised, and all the house of Israel are uncircumcised of heart. And almost all the translations go in that direction. There's a couple translations that do a little variation. NIV is one of them. Egypt, Judah, Edom, Ammon, Moab. They cut out the sons of, but that's okay. And all who live in the wilderness in distant places. And no mention about the clipping. How did they get in distant places? Well, some interpreters understood the clipped, meaning the places that are cut off, the far ends of the sides. And they take this as referring to the far ends, the clipped portions of the land that are far away. And so that's how they get in distant places, because they don't think that reference to the custom of clipping the hair on the side of the forehead, the interpreters didn't feel like that really fit in this context. Although the NIV does have a note that it could potentially mean that, but they prefer to translate it in distant places. Most of our modern translations have not gone in this direction. They've tended to see it more referring to this pagan custom over here. For all these nations are really uncircumcised, probably literally in their flesh and obviously in their hearts as well. But even the whole house of Israel is uncircumcised in heart, even though they are circumcised in the flesh. Again, God wanted these pure hearts before him. He calls his people to purify their own hearts. Ultimately, it's something that he himself is going to have to do. Well, that brings us to the end of chapter 9 in our Daily Dose of Hebrew. We have another section we're going to be looking at, so join us soon as we start chapter 10, a marvelous, marvelous chapter in the Hebrew text. Shalom.